Good morning and welcome to those joining us here for today's discussion on research administration as part of our Ask Set Anything series. There's been a lot of interest in this event, and we're really pleased to have so many people joining us both in the Zoom room as well on the live stream. To begin, I'd like to first do our treaty acknowledgement. The University of Alberta acknowledges that we are located on Treaty 6 territory and respects the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant communities. To begin this conversation, it is important to acknowledge our current state. The university's operating budget has been reduced by $170 million over just the last 2.5 years, and more cuts are anticipated. Despite these reductions, the university is committed to maintaining its core mission of research and teaching. To do this, collectively, we must be more efficient and responsive to the changing needs of our institution while better designing our administrative structures so we can continue to support these core missions. While the new operating model will ensure that we can operate effectively and efficiently within our new budget reality, a very important goal for us is to create a vibrant and healthy working environment that provides staff with meaningful work, engaging experience, and fulfilling career paths. I do want to recognize and acknowledge that we're all experiencing different and often difficult emotions during this time of change, which is understandable. Please reach out if you need help. The university has many health and well-being resources that can be accessed through the faculty and staff section on the U of A website. So I encourage you to check with them so that you and your colleagues have the support that you need. You all make valuable contributions to the success of the university, and we want to create an environment in which you can continue to do great work. Some of you might have questions about what this restructuring means for your positions and your career growth opportunities. Throughout this process, the process of implementing our model, we commit to continuing to share timely, transparent, and truthful information about the plan and the steps we are taking. Not all the answers are known yet. This is an iterative process, and we're building the answers as we go along. But we will share what we can today and answer as many of the questions as we can. We will continue to host Ask Anything events on research administration. We will also share information on the University of Alberta Tomorrow website as it becomes available, as well as on the Research Admin Stream webpage. I am Rob Monroe, as I mentioned. I'm the executive lead of SET, and I'll be acting as the moderator for today's session. To help answer your questions relating to the Research Admin Stream, we've brought together a panel consisting of subject matter experts. Before we get started, let's take a few minutes to introduce everyone. First, I want to introduce Dr. Steve Patent, Interim Dean in the Faculty of Arts and the Dean co-sponsor of the Research Administration Workstream. Next, I'll introduce Dr. Walter Dixon, Interim Vice President, Research and Innovation, Administrative Co-Sponsor of the Research Administration Workstream. Next is Dr. Florence Glanfield, Vice Provost, Indigenous Programming and Research. Next is Dr. Anya Ulrich, Acting Associate Vice President of Research. Michael Wolosik, who is the Executive Director of Research Services. Denis Fortin, Research Administration Project Manager and in the Service Excellence Transformation Team. And last, but definitely not least, Brian Stewart, Program Director, Administrative Transformation, again within the Service Excellence Transformation Team. So we're focused today on research administration specifically and how we will be realigning research administration services to fit in the overall operating model. This slide shows the overall operating model and how research administration fits into that model. The slides presented were shared earlier this week with those who registered for today's event and have also been posted on the live stream link for those watching there, so you can access this material. They will be added to the SET website after the event. I'd now like to turn it over to Walter, who will make some opening remarks.
Thanks, Robin. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to try to keep my remarks short so we can get to the questions as quickly as possible, but I did want to set some context a little bit to add to what Rob has already said. As you all know, and as he mentioned from the outset, teaching and research is really core to our mission, and particularly as a comprehensive and academic research university, the University of Alberta is one of 4 research-intensive universities in the province. Carrying out research is absolutely core to everything that we do as a university. We're globally recognized as a powerhouse in research, and we want to keep it that way. Everybody participating in this call today is either directly or indirectly involved in research. And we all understand how complex an integrated research enterprise is. And in some of the slides that are in the deck that has been shared with you, we describe some of the aspects and particularly focus on the research administration stream as what we're working on and what we're going to be talking about today, and hopefully entertaining your questions. It goes without saying, and I won't reiterate too much of what has already been said, we're working in a very challenging environment. We know about essentially the 30% cut to our Campus Alberta grant. We've had to respond by academic restructuring. The SET program, as you know, has got 6 interlocking streams that are described on the slide in front of you, and research administration is one of those. We know that there's also going to be an Alberta 2030 report from the provincial government describing what they see as their vision for the future of higher education in the province. So we'll have to respond to that in due course. We've fed into that process already. We all know also about Alberta's economic challenges and the deficit budgets and the challenges in the oil and gas sector, et cetera. On top of that, we're all aware of the pandemic. We're all living in a Zoom world. So it's a very challenging environment. Without wanting to sort of dwell on cliches, we also know, we've heard, this is unprecedented. Status quo is not an option. So we're all aware of that. So what we're trying to do in this process is to work towards building a new system that will allow us to carry on our essential research mission and disrupt it as little as possible and try to move forward as a highly successful research intensive university in the future. Please understand that today is the first probably in a series of these kinds of presentations. It continues to be a work in progress. We'll try to answer your questions to the extent that we're able to, but understand this is still evolving and there may be things that we can't address today. So with that, maybe I'll ask Grant to advance to the next slide, please. So this just sort of shows where we are in the process. In the middle of the figure, there's a timeline. We're in the discovery process at the moment. We've just come to almost the conclusion of that process. Many of you have participated in the discovery workbook exercise, and I'll have more to say about that in a subsequent slide. And this is really essentially an information gathering questionnaire that's gone out to 140 different groups. We've received, I think, approximately 90 responses, lots of data to chew through. We've also had some focus groups, some Q&A sessions, I think 12 focus groups, those concluded this Wednesday. So a lot of material to process, and thank you for those of you who did participate in that exercise. The next stage will be the beginning of the planning stage. We'll analyze and validate all of that information, see how it maps to the kinds of services that we can offer out of the Office of the VPRI, and then move into the transition or sort of more the implementation phase, which will begin in sometime in early June. That will continue at least until November, but possibly into the next calendar year, with the idea of wrapping everything up by at the very latest March of next year. So this slide I just want to spend a moment on. Really, this is just sort of trying to map out, and as I say, you've got these slides. So these 3 interlocking circles, or Venn diagram, if you like to think of it that way, shows what the SET program, the research administration stream, is addressing. That's the yellow circle to the lower right. The other circles represent research, which is undertaken by faculty members and their teams, And we will not be weighing into the organization of that. That will continue to be under the control and academic freedom of researchers and the units that they are involved with. The lower left side is the research operations. That covers all the sort of shared services, the internal research administrative matters that occur in the departments, faculties, and soon to be colleges. All of the lab space, the infrastructure that it goes along with research, the libraries, the equipment, all of those kinds of things fall under research operations. What this stream in research administration is about is really looking at the operations that happen centrally in the VPRI portfolio and how they impact the services that we can provide and the supports we can provide to researchers across the academy. Things like grant development support, negotiating funding sources, fund management, technology transfer, ethics in all its forms, clinical trials, regulatory processes, etc. So those are the kinds of things that this service excellence transformation stream is about. Clearly, there's intersections between research in the faculties, departments, and colleges and the research operations in those, and those are shown in those areas of overlap. Particularly critical to that, right at the very center, the nexus of all of these things, is the sort of project management support that needs to be provided to our researchers and the critical role of senior leadership within those departments, faculties, and colleges. And that's the ADRs and the vice deans of research, for example. So maybe next slide, please. So this is just some very early information about the discovery process. As I say, 146 workbooks were circulated, very detailed questionnaires, a lot of work to complete them, and we appreciate that greatly because the quality of the data we get back really informs the quality of what we can do in terms of decision making. 89 of these have been completed and are now being analyzed by our business analyst team. The responses that we've received represent 17 faculties, including the Faculty of Grad Studies and Research, 37 departments, as you can see on here, many units, centers and institutes, and 22 individual researchers. As I say, we've had a number of engagements. They're listed there. I won't read it to you. What we have found, though, in that process of the Q&A sessions, the consultation meetings, and the focus groups, and early data from the workbooks suggests that there's very many non-standardized processes that exist out in our very diverse research community, over 260 so far. Within the VPRI office, I can speak to that there's probably 50 processes that we're familiar with in our portfolio. And so how can we bring that number of 260 down to a more manageable number that will allow the kind of services that we can provide to be mapped to what's happening out in the departments and faculties? So the kinds of processes that would be covered would be things like, preparing monthly reconciliation documents for financials, quarterly, semi, or annual reporting to the researcher, approval processes for grant applications within a faculty, and support to researchers in writing ethics applications. So those are just a subset of things that are currently going on, and there's high diversity across the academy and how that's done. So just some preliminary comments, and you can read these at your leisure, but I think one of the messages we're getting clearly back from the community is that researchers want to spend their time on their research rather than on the administration associated with their research. They need quick, reliable guidance and access to details on their application and projects. If possible, they prefer a single trusted point of contact to navigate all aspects of research administration and to deal with central, for example. I think there's a fair degree of comfort in terms of some of the services that we provide in terms of transactional kinds of services being pooled and where they exist in the faculties or departments, some of those being centralized, but that's a discussion in process. All of the kind of things involving strategic research, advice, decision-making, training, et cetera, that are listed in number 4 there, require highly knowledgeable individuals working with the researchers and faculty members directly. What we've also observed is, as a result of the uniform process, is that when we were actually accounting for who was doing research administration support across the academy, it became clear that it was in many cases, a very small part of what an individual is doing. There would be somebody who was a sort of, I guess we could call them a generalist, somebody who's in multitasking, doing lots of things within their department or faculty, but not specializing in research. So we were seeing things as low as 0.1 of an FTE providing research services. And their other duties might be completely unrelated to research. There is also a bit of a lack of clarity what research administration means, but that's something we can talk about perhaps in the question period. Next slide, please. So very quickly, just this research administration model that you see in front of you here really extends that Venn diagram that I showed you previously into how the research community can interact with the research administration stream, and particularly the Office of the Vice President, Research and Innovation. What this is showing here is 5 different areas, and these names are sort of placeholders really for what will finally be in place. But this covers sort of the extent of what we believe we can offer as a center of expertise in the Office of the VPRI. Researcher development and success, research certification and oversight, research strategy, training and skills development, research administrative services, technology transfer and commercialization. So that's sort of the continuum or the spectrum of services that we believe we can offer in our portfolio. The service partners, which I'm sure there will be questions about, will be are individuals who will be embedded within the academic units. So the faculties and the colleges. These are the liaison officers between our office and the academic units themselves. They'll have a range of roles and duties, and they're listed there in the form of verbs in terms of their roles. We also hope to have a help desk so that if there are questions or inquiries from the research community, to sort of triage where those questions can go to and who can respond, that we will be able to provide that service. Also, external to the university, the public sometimes wants to know about what's going on at the university, who to engage with, and that would include general public and also industry partners, businesses, not-for-profits who want to interact with the university, but they're looking at this behemoth of the University of Alberta and not even sure where they're supposed to go. So next slide, please. This just breaks out those centers of expertise that I listed on the last slide in a bit more detail. I won't take the time to go through those, but you can see that some of those activities, I think many of you, particularly those who are involved in research administration currently, can probably see yourself and your roles in some of these interactions with our portfolio. Next slide, please. And this last one is really sort of at a glance, and I don't expect you to be able to read the slide, but you have the deck and you can read these in a bit more detail. This sort of shows the flow within our portfolio in terms of our service offerings. Very early stuff involving planning, going to pre-award services, post-award services, and then more general services such as information management to gather information and data on funding so you can provide those in some of your applications, etc. And then finally, the help desk that I mentioned previously. Again, the definitions of the partners' roles are on the left-hand side of the left-hand panel of this slide, and you can look at that at your leisure. So with that, I'd like to just turn to my friend and colleague, Dr. Florence Glanfield, Vice Provost of Indigenous Programming and Research, for some comments from her about the Indigenous Research Strategy Task Force. Over to you, Florence.
Thank you, Walter, and good morning to all of you who are able to be with us today. I just wanted to briefly say that as a result of the initiatives that are connected with SET and the uniform data, we also noticed that there were some gaps occurring within the services that we were offering. And those gaps were around the ways in which we engage with Indigenous engaged research. And it's so crucial at this point in our life as a history and as a country and as a province. And you'll recognize that Rob mentioned an acknowledged territory when he first opened this session. So what does it mean for us as a research institution when we do those land acknowledgements and the treaty acknowledgements? It means that we need to look at processes and procedures that we have in place to say, what does it mean to be a treaty partner with Indigenous communities and nations? And so along with the recognition of the treaty relationship, our funding agencies are requiring us to think differently about Indigenous engaged research. What is the role of a researcher? How do we be less extractive with Indigenous communities? And how is it that we build partnerships? So this work crosses all disciplines of research across every single aspect of our university, and it requires a coordinated approach, in our opinion, or in my opinion. So we've been meeting as an Indigenous Research Strategy Task Force to look at the practices and places across all aspects of research development, implementation, and knowledge mobilization. And I thank you all for offering and thinking about the ways in which our practices will need to change around Indigenous engaged research. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Walter and Florence. So before we continue with the programming, I just do want to make a comment is that unfortunately, it looks like Zoom has limited our room capacity to 100. So I know there's been a number of people that have registered for the event and have not been able to get in, and my apologies to you that that has occurred. But we will move forward and we'll think about what we can do going forward. I am now pleased to start into the question and answer part of our session. And first up, I'd like to welcome Dr. Marie Carrière, and I apologize if I get your name wrong. Marie is the Associate Dean Research for the Faculty of Arts, and today we've invited her to ask the first question of our panel.
All right, thank you so much. So I will dive right in. You may have heard research administrators and researchers themselves stress the comprehensive nature of research administration and support. The set structure separates HR, finance, and research administration as three streams distinct from one another. Meanwhile, our experience clearly shows how intricately connected these three components are within research administration and support. Essential to research support are comprehensive and often non-transactional, non-quantifiable knowledge of and access to individual goals, project goals, researcher needs, budgets, HR practices for GRA hires, such a huge part of research admin, and U of A and external funding opportunities, policies, and procedures. And so this is the question. Will and how can the three-pronged siloed structure of SET still allow the delivery of comprehensive advice, access, and support to researchers?
Great. Thank you, Marie, for that question. And a really good question. And I know we've heard similar comments when we've gone through our discovery processes. And I know personally, I've heard similar comments in recent engagement that I've had with chairs. So it's a really good question. A lot of people are asking similar type of questions as well. We do agree that the HR and finance are important components of the support required by the research community, and it integrates in with the research component as well. HR and finance processes in general do have a consistent approach across campus. There are some aspects of HR and finance that would be consistent across campus. For instance, in an HR world, we have our collective agreements. We have to make sure that we're following those. In a finance world, there are certain rules that accompany accounting processes. So we do see similarities across all of the university with respect to HR, finance, and particularly how it integrates with research as well. We do believe that there's a gain in simplicity and responsiveness when all of the processors are handled the same way as much as possible by the same groups of individuals. So we are trying to gain through this whole experience a consistent approach, which leads to a more leads to a more efficient approach. And so that's what the whole SET program is trying to do. But we do recognize that there are going to be nuances within the research stream, as there is in other areas across the university. And it's really going to be fundamental that the HR partners, the finance partners, the research partners that are all working in embedded areas in the different faculties, that they see themselves as part of a team. They all have their technical expertise, but they themselves have to work together to make sure that the processes work end to end. It's not a siloed approach, and that it's a seamless coordination, so that those that are accessing those services don't see that siloing. They don't see it being as HR and finance, and that there's like a series of handoffs. To that activity has to work in the background, and those handoffs have to occur. But the end user, the client, that should not be seeing those. Should not be seeing those handoffs. So part of the answer is making sure that we're designing those processes from that end-to-end state with the customer thought in mind. So I hope that answers your question. And thank you again for asking that today. I would now like to take the opportunity to open it up to questions from others. So if you can please raise your virtual hand to get into the question, to get your question into the queue. We would appreciate it if you can ask only one question at a time so that everybody has the opportunity to answer their questions. But saying that, if you have a second question, please feel free to put yourself back into the queue, and then we'll come back to you again, assuming we have time at the end. So if I can ask all the participants who are interested to please raise their hands. Okay, Barbara.
It's there.
Please.
I just want to ask a question regarding, I know that the Faculty of Arts did centralized research administration almost 10 years ago. And one of the things that I have found to be a bit of a hiccup is the integration between research administration and HR, as well as what used to be the internal control for research administration has now become the independent reviewer. And during that process and working with the researcher, one of the things that has kind of fallen through the cracks is making sure that that the independent reviewer is really working with the researcher to make sure that there's no over expenditures in the research accounts. So, and what ends up happening is when there are over expenditures in the research accounts, that ends up impacting the operating budget. So, what is this new process going to look like so that it does not, because now that it's far removed from the departments, what process is going to be put in place so that it does not impact our operating accounts?
Great, great question, Barbara. Thank you. I'll actually maybe turn to, I'm going to suggest maybe either Steve or Michael want to take a crack at answering this question. Steve, I know that this is a Faculty of Arts, so Steve, I'm going to turn to you maybe first.
And I was going to try to pass this off to Michael because it's an important question, and Barb, you're not the first to ask it, and we've discussed this within our group, and I think Michael will have a few things to say on the matter.
Yeah, definitely. I think the independent review and internal control process is one of those areas where, in my experience, it's evolved into different kind of work, department by department and faculty by faculty. And I think what we were able to do with this, with having it as more of in one of these transaction or shared services areas, or how we're moving it, is to make it more standardized about what they're looking for and before it gets approved. And so if we decide that one of the things they need to do is make sure funds are available before they approve it, we can do that. And we can really make sure that's happening across the campus very quickly. Whereas right now, the practice tends to be, if there's an emerging need in one area, it starts to evolve and they do things, but it doesn't kind of make its way across the campus. So that's how we would plan to address those types of concerns.
Great, thank you, Michael. Thank you, Barbara. Tara.
So I've got a question related to EDI. And I know that the SET and UAT people have had implicit bias training. I'm hoping you've also had GBA plus training. So I just want to know, have you yet, or will you be doing a gender-based analysis plus activity to use multiple and intersectional lenses in developing the processes you're going to use to create and recruit or move staff into new roles? And if you have done that, what key learnings have you implemented into your processes so far that have come out of a GBA plus analysis?
Great, thank you, Tara. I'm going to take a little bit of a talk about the SET process, and then I'll look to hand off to either Denis or Anya to maybe comment further. So we have provided the GBA Plus training for all of the SET team as a background piece of information. We are in the process of looking for more resources in order to, frankly, increase the knowledge of the SET team around EDI processes. So we recognize that we need to do more. We plan to build those into our process review processes. But to answer your question directly, have we completed that yet? No, we have not done an awful lot. Now, a lot of that is because we haven't done a lot of the process review. We're in those steps already. But we would anticipate that we'll be doing more of that type of activity, and we would make sure that we communicate to the community what our learnings have been through that process, and we continue to want to learn more as we go forward. Denis and Anya, do you have anything else you would want to add?
I think, Robert, that you answered the question pretty well, actually. At this stage, we are just at the very beginning, so we just completed the discovery process. We focused on the workbooks, and we collected a lot of information through focus groups. So we now have to digest that information, and that will inform the next course of action. Of course, Tara, what you just suggested may be included going forward once we have completed the analysis of the information we got.
Yeah, and I'm happy to step in as well. So Tara is one of my biggest champions of EDI working in the STEM field. And I really appreciate the question, Tara. And I really appreciate all the hard work that you've done in STEM, in the STEM areas on campus, because it's been incredible. And I just want to extend your EDI question, because during the discovery phase, we also discussed sort of systemic barriers that exist in our current practices that actually, you know, are creating some issues for our early career researchers and our equity deserving faculty members. So we're looking at that, discussing that, and hoping to see new processes that help, you know, decrease those barriers. And as you know well, Tara, our tri-councils and funding agencies are expecting a lot of us. And we need to really work in a holistic way where we're not just relying on Associate Dean Research, our amazing research facilitators, to bear the brunt of educating our faculty members and providing those supports. So we really need to see those embedded as well. And the last one is our postdoctoral fellows, because that does exist in the DPRI office, and they are the future early career researchers. And there's such an incredible opportunity there for us to bring in EDI lens. So thank you for these questions. Keep asking, because we need to be held accountable. So thank you.
Yeah, I would echo that. Please keep asking those questions, because yes, we do need to be held accountable. Thank you for the questions, and we'll just move on to Anne-Marie.
Hi there, thanks for holding this session today. Our group is just wondering, with the consolidation of a lot of research administration as the SET project is going to do, will it affect the way that we apply for research grants?
Great question. Walter, I would maybe throw that to you to start with.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for the question, Anne-Marie. I don't think there will be major changes to the way you apply for grants. I think, you know, we're all sort of working together to try to figure out, you know, what's going to happen at the college level, and what activities will be elevated from the departments to the faculties to the colleges. So as that structure becomes more clear, I think we'll understand a little bit about, you know, for example, in a research competition program where there's a limited number of submissions allowed for the university, for example, there'll have to be some sort of prioritization process within the departments, the faculties, and the colleges as to what they want to go forward, and then there might be an adjudication at the university institutional level. So that would, that might result in some changes coming out of the new college structure. But in terms of regular sort of discovery grants for NSERC or operating grants, CIHR, or regular SSHRC grants, I don't see any major changes in the processes that are going to be followed. The review processes that hopefully will create better, better opportunities for review as we create these new systems. So I'm hoping that in some faculties where they have maybe not had as much research administrative support, that now in these new structures that will emerge, there'll be more opportunities for early guidance, perhaps some mentoring through expansion of some of the services that we already have, but now that will be extended across larger groups. That's my hope.
Great, thank you.
Great. Again, thank you for the question. Thank you, Walter. I will call on Heather.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks, everybody. Good morning. I think actually this is a really nice segue from what Walter was just saying. As you think forward about the design stage and the design process, the next few steps, and thinking about researcher development success, the strategic training skills parts of the categories in terms of what the VPRI portfolio will provide, I can't imagine how you are going to design that unless you know whether or not you're going to have associate deans of research. And I'm wondering where you are in that phase, if you can talk about how that's going, what that is going to look like. ADRs right now play an incredibly essential role in those processes. And if you're not going to have ADRs, then that's going to make a real difference in terms of the research administration kinds of what the service partners will be doing. So I'm wondering if can you speak to that, Walter?
I can try. I mean, I don't have a definitive answer at this point, Heather, because it's a discussion that, again, I'm afraid goes back to what is going to happen at the college level. And without that being known, I think we've heard loud and clear from the consultations that we've had to date, the important role that the ADRs and vice deans of research play in a whole host of activities related to research administration. So I think it's extremely likely that there will be positions akin to that in the new structures that emerge. Whether those individuals will be part of a, let me just say, like a research office, perhaps within a college that has, perhaps not as many ADRs across the board within a college, but certainly a critical mass that allows it to be effective. The autonomous faculties that remain clearly will have to have representation of an ADR-like entity as well. What they'll be called and where they sit in the hierarchy within the colleges as they're reimagined, not sure at this point. But yeah, we've got the message loud and clear of the central role for those individuals.
Yeah, I could add a little bit to that. I think it's going to be really important to have strong academic leadership as well as strong administrative support and professionalized research administration support. So the role of ADRs is going to be critical, and it continues to be critical. It will have to adjust to where service partners are located and exactly what the roles of service partners are. And to the extent that some service partners are at the faculty level, that limits the amount of change needed. To the extent that they're at the college level, it increases the amount of change needed. The solution to making sure this is still effective for researchers preparing grant applications, moving forward with their projects, is going to be about relationship building between the service partners, the college level, the faculty level. And these things have to be top of mind. Things that end up in the college level cannot be distancing researchers from the support. They have to be somehow integrated in a way that it feels very local. And I actually think there's huge opportunities in the creation of service partners to make more of the support feel local. And by local, I mean close to and very proximate to the researchers. And we have to keep that in mind in the design process.
Well, I don't envy you trying to design it. I totally agree. but it's going to be a challenge to make that design work. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, thank you for the comments and questions. I noticed, Nadir, your hand has been up for a while, so I'm gonna get you're fourth on the list, but your name keeps coming in and out, so I'm gonna come to you, Nadir.
Yeah, thank you very much. Other people start asking my questions, so I couldn't.
Oh,
so I have another
so you
question
did actually
for
take
you.
your name off.
Yeah, I have another one about should we expect any interruptions? Because when we start, for example, grant submission, we will submit the grant in June in one model, and July there's another model just kicking in. Should we expect any delay in the processing grant applications, or the second or third stages of receiving funding, for instance?
I guess I can take a stab at that. The expectation, Nadir, is that there will be as little disruption as possible. We'll try to make it as seamless as possible, and it won't be happening overnight. We won't suddenly flick a switch and all of a sudden you have to go through a completely different process. It's going to be, we'll socialize what's going to happen well in advance of any change, and we'll make sure that the people who are responsible for those, receiving those submissions, et cetera, are in place before we, alert you that you have to send it to a different person if that's the case.
I think that's good. So thanks, Nadir, for the question. Kelty.
I'm a department administrator in the School of Business. When my researchers get an award, I do all the setup in the system. So I go into financials, I do everything. My question is, will I be continuing to do that under the new model, or will that get taken away? And the only concern I have is right now, my researchers are very comfortable with me. They can come to me with questions, they get their answers. They know I'll take care of the setup. They know I'm monitoring end dates. They know I'll apply for extensions as needed. And I wonder, will that role stay within the departments that we're doing it right now, or will that be taken out and put in a service center?
I'll probably look, maybe I'll look to Michael to start with, and then maybe Brian, I'll keep you on deck for the answer.
Sure, thanks. I'll take a stab at it. I mean, we were not at the stage yet at all where you said, here's the role or person or where they are that needs to do it. But I can tell you we do have identified the need to initiate all these requests has to be thought about. We just can't assume we're going to put all these people somewhere and requests will come into them from somebody. We have to be very clear from initiation right to completion, who's doing that and where do they belong. And it's one of those areas where we certainly realize that you need somebody in the faculty initiating a lot of these, because centrally they'll have no idea to even know that this needs to be initiated. So that's the part and the nuances that we need to look at in terms of where the people actually need to be located to do this. And certainly the need to have people embedded in the faculties is not lost. We know that that's a critical place where these kind of things get initiated.
Thank you, Michael. Brian, anything to add?
Not a lot to what Michael said, just in terms of the design on service is still very nascent in terms of where we're going, and research is a little bit further back to other streams. So this is something that obviously is the discovery has to go through and so forth before we understand how those flows are going to be developed and where best located and best handled. It's a bit early to say that, but obviously when you look at the SET model entirely, we're trying to create consolidated service entities so that we don't have bits all over the place, that we can have streamlined approaches. And while there's definitely specific knowledge that you want, and you don't want to have things routing all over the place before it gets the right person, that doesn't mean that you can't have efficient methodologies for at least asking questions and starting balls rolling and then get it to the right person. So from that perspective, there's still work to be done, but we do have a base model and a base philosophy around this.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad to know that it's on your radar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. But I'm going to ask if everybody don't be shy. We've only got a couple people in the queue, so please make sure that you put your hand up to ask your questions. But I know somebody who's not shy, and that's Susan. So I'll go to you, Susan.
Rob, thank you. Thank you for taking the words literally out of my mouth. Everybody, I'm not shy. I'm hearing a lot of questions about integration of processes kind of at the beginning, at setup or at initiation of a project. And I'm wondering if, and I'm thinking I'm probably going to direct this to Florence, but likely everybody will have some thoughts on this. How are we thinking about integration over time? As you know, from conceptualizing a project to maybe community engagement or consultation, or maybe it's approaching industry. How are we thinking about onboarding and offboarding of trainees, research data management issues? There's a forward-looking process, and we know research changes, and so I'm wondering, I'm thinking a little bit about the work of the task force, Florence, and I'm wondering how we're going to capture those things, weave those things into the set processes, into the new research administration processes. And I realize that's a really big question, so just kind of opening a door.
So Florence, you were named. Do you want to start?
Well, thank you, Susan, for that really big question. So in the work that I'm doing collectively, I guess, there's a number of prongs of activities, right? And one of them starts even one of our core missions is around teaching. And so even as graduate students who are beginning to imagine themselves as researchers, they need to better understand the histories and complexities and what does it mean at this point in our histories, right? So we've got work that's happening at the graduate student level. We need to encourage across our programs, even in how is it that we engage with Indigenous communities or take up Indigenous engaged research, and what does that mean? So there's that piece. Then we also have faculty members who are working with communities, who are learning to work with communities. So there's a big piece of education. So I think across all of the initiatives, certainly in relation to the Indigenous engagement, it's going to be about education and helping people to better understand. But if people have not yet taken our Indigenous MOOC, then that's the best place to start. We need to understand, why is it that the whole nation, the tri-council agencies, our research ethics processes are changing at this point in time, and we don't get an opportunity to understand that without understanding the colonial history that have extracted knowledge from communities that have not recognized Indigenous sovereignty. So I think it's a long road, but I think if we don't start, then it's never going to shift in the culture of our research and teaching. Thank you.
Danita, do you want to potentially add anything to the process at all?
No, I think that Florence covered it all, actually. Okay. So we're just going to be more careful along the way, gathering more information and making sure that all these questions are duly covered during the process.
Great, thank you. And I'm just going to come to Steve, because I think he wanted to add in on one of the previous questions.
Well, I thought Kelty's question was really, really important, and it's linked back to Marie's question about siloing. For an individual researcher, one of the things that avoids siloing is that they often have somebody in their department or their faculty that they go to who takes care of everything. So they can initiate the hiring of a GRA, they can take care of an over expenditure or just an expenditure. And there's a concern that the creation of transaction hubs will mean that researcher, instead of going to somebody like Kelty who's taken care of them for so long, they have to go to a transaction hub for these different things. And this is something we have to be really aware of as we move through the design process. And it was already mentioned by Michael, I think it was, that at the department and faculty level, we will have our people initiating. And like Kelty said, they will still have to monitor and to track things. And we need to make sure that the way in which SET puts everything in place allows researchers in their home departments to really feel like they have a sense of what's happening. And that's where we have to break down or make sure that we don't end up with silos is at that level. And I think we have to keep Kelty's question in mind as we move forward, or else researchers will feel confused and poorly served. So.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, for jumping in there and adding more context. I'll call on Heather.
Thank you. I'm actually reading a question for my fellow senior advisor, Dr. Salim, who isn't in this forum. And so this is his question. And so he says, what is the reporting structure of the group roles? What is the center of expertise versus the service partners? And where are the various people who are conceived of as being part of the research admin portfolio going to be paid from? So where, is the salary support going to come from central or from the college or from the faculty? And what he's pointing out is, will those structural changes also trigger changes in the new budget model? And all of these are significant because, of course, they inform how the positions are going to roll out for people.
Great question. And I'm going to call on Brian, actually, as the starting point.
I think that's not one I would know. I think that's very much in the research side. I'd be looking at Walter on that one.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, not at all. That's more structural.
Sorry for the poor handoff. Walter.
Not a problem. I don't think we're at the point where we have a very clear idea. I certainly absolutely right, Heather and Saad, who asked the question. It is linked to the new budget model. An understanding of how resources will flow to fund the new positions that need to be created, those people who may be transferred from faculties or departments to the center, how those will be funded. My sense, and again, it's not something I can say definitively. My sense is that the service partners, the idea would be that those would be, because they report to the VPRI, that would be a central responsibility to resource those individuals in terms of salary support. So I think I can say that, but in terms of the exact model that we're going to come up with, once we know how we map the needs of the faculties and departments and colleges to what we can offer in the VPRI, for example, until we've done that exercise and analyzed all that information and done several iterations of that, probably, I don't think we'll know exactly how that resourcing and funding will flow. So sorry, it's a bit of an incomplete answer. Hope that helps a little bit, though.
May I ask a quick little follow-up? Is the anticipated timing of these kinds of things? And I've got 3 people who are now chatting me this exact same thing. What is the timing going to be on this rollout?
That would be a set question. So I think I'll have to punt that one back to Brian or Rob.
So Brian, you don't get off the hook.
Yeah, I know.
I'm going to go to you.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. In terms of it, like we're in the we're moving along a different, as you know, in terms of HR, finance, and IT. They're the first ones, and research is sort of tucked in behind them. We're doing the discovery process now, and that's set to complete in the next few weeks. We also have to finish off in terms of the organizational design and structuring. So I don't see that the changes that we're looking at implementing that's going to be over the next maybe 3 to 6 months. To be quite honest, I don't think anything's going to be imminent. We still have a lot of work to do. And don't take it to the bank that it's 3 to 6. I'm just saying is that we will have a better answer within 3 months to be able to predict it, but I don't think anything's going to happen before 3 months. And then in that time, we should be able to roll out the plan from all the work that we've done, and then you will know what's going on. But I wouldn't expect anything to happen before then.
May I beg an indulgence, Marie? I see your hand is up, but someone just sent me another question. And the question is this going to be used as an excuse to as an excuse to lower people's hay points? Maybe that's a Denis question.
Rob,
yeah, Denis, if you want to.
Yeah, actually, no, because the positions that are going to be created are going to be evaluated for what they are. So essentially, there's no plan or strategy to review or to downgrade any position. A position that is created, developed, will be evaluated for what it is.
Exactly. Yeah,
and that's consistent across SET.
Yeah, exactly. Across, Brian, just to reiterate, Brian says it's consistent across that. I mean, the evaluation process holds and they evaluate to where they are. So I think we have time for one last question, and she's had her hand up for a little while here. So Marie, do you want to ask her? You get to book and us. You get to ask the very first question and the very last question.
Well, not if there's another question though.
No, you're actually there's it's you're the last one on the list as well. So.
Okay. Well, it's, I almost don't even want to ask this question, but I will. So the reality of this process is, cuts, and which, logically means less support. So I have a question about transactional matters. And, I just want to preface by saying that research processes are never merely transactional. And I just, if we take the example of honoraria to Indigenous elders, that's not just a financial transaction, it's a complex piece. So anyway, just so you can see how much I don't want to ask this question. So here's my question. Has there been any conversation? Are there any plans to put in place some kind of a self-serve resource for researchers to go to for things that they may need to do to process or to find out for themselves going forward? I mean, are we looking at sort of coming up with a design where researchers will just need to fend for themselves a little bit more? And is there a plan for that? I hate my question, but there it is.
Marie, it's a good question. I don't hate your question. I'm gonna come back to Denise specifically on research, but I will talk in general within SET is that we are looking at some for staff, for students, some ability to have some self-serve processes, well-designed, well-integrated self-serve processes. And the intent of doing that kind of work is so that we can keep our resources into the more strategic, the areas where we need people to be more interactive. So the whole SET model, when we talk about transactional pieces, we want to make sure that we're dealing with those as efficiently as we possibly can. We want to have, where it makes sense, to have some self-serve pieces. And all of that is around making sure then we can keep our resources for the more strategic areas. So that's part of the whole process within SET. I'll specifically turn over to Denis to talk about if there's been any thought, and it may be premature, but around the research administration field.
It's a little bit premature, but at the same time, that's the reason why, Mary, we ran those 12 focus groups actually to understand better what the needs are. There may be processes where it's going to be actually valuable and beneficial for the researchers to be able to do it themselves. And in some cases, it will not, because the researcher wants to focus on their research, not necessarily on administration. So we heard that information, and we are now digesting all this information, and we will come back with options where we take into consideration the actual needs of the researchers.
Great. Maybe I'll just add one thing. I mean, I think something we have heard is that in some cases, researchers see some of the processes as bureaucratic, and they'd like to say directly, get out of our way. Let us do this. We could probably do it much faster. So if that's the case, then and there's an obvious fix on a self-serve thing that will allow, a turnaround time on something to be accelerated, then I say, let's go for it. So I think these sessions we've had and the information we're gathering, we're looking to the research community to provide suggestions. I mean, we've had quite a few good suggestions during the process of ways we can do things better. What about doing this? How about that? That would probably speed things up. Yeah, good idea. So if you hear those kinds of things from your research, your researchers in your faculties or units or administrators, think of ways that we could do things in a more streamlined fashion, we're all ears.
Rob, if I could, just to build on Mulder's point there, and that is that part of SET is when we're doing the process redesigns, we do take a lean approach, and part of lean is understanding the needs of your users or of your customers, and on the other side is about eliminating waste, and that's crucial. And the other thing that we're doing is trying to use technology where possible to automate workflow. So it's not all just about self-serve; it can be about taking things that are currently being done and making them quicker, more efficient. So I wouldn't like us to get hung up on it's only self-serve or current. It's actually not. There's a range of different options that we can do to improve the administration flows.
Great. Thank you, everybody. So I do need to bring this to, I do want to wrap this up now. And first, I do want to apologize once again for the technical issue we had with the number of people that were able to be in on the Zoom room. And we'll look to see what we can do going forward. And again, thank you for everyone for all of the engaging questions, the honest feedback, the thoughtful questions, the awkward questions. They're all very much appreciated. If anyone has had a question that weren't answered here, we do have a set feedback form, and we very much encourage everybody to fill out the form, and we will use that and our set website to answer questions. So when we get those questions coming in, we will put the answers in, and we'll make sure that they get up onto the appropriate websites. I would like to give a big thank you to our panelists, Steve, Walter, Florence, Michael, Anya, Brian, and Denis. Great job, guys. Really appreciate all the help. Thank you to Claire and Grant for helping us on the technical side today, and definitely to Pam and Jason for helping with the ASL interpretation. Thanks as well to all the members of the SET team. There's a phenomenal amount of work that goes into the background to have these events take place. So just thanks to everybody within the SET team who has a role to play in these events. We are working to schedule an Ask SET Anything event for our student services streams, our external engagement stream, and our procurement stream. And we will post those dates once they've been established. So once again, thank you for coming out, and I hope you have a great Friday, and I hope you have a fabulous weekend. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.